Good.
Should we go back a little bit? You're right at the top of the thing.
Is that better?
Yeah, we under it.
Yeah, it's a well, actually the light's coming from all over the place
Yeah,
here.
you're
As a photographer, we've got so many cross shadows, we'll just have to work it.
yeah, just
It's what we say, not what we look like. So.
so just a short, like 5 minutes.
Sure.
Because nobody listens to anything more than that. The attention span of
5 minutes
kids.
is already good, but yeah.
Yeah, or even shorter than that. Hello, Nick.
Hello there.
So I've come to see your exhibition with your new NFT collection.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about it?
Yes, it started 2 years ago. It was a way of working, trying to do something new in fashion. I was getting increasingly concerned about how fashion is bad for the planet and how it's not going anywhere, and I'm not very keen on the whole of the kind of, if you want, the market forces leading creativity. So it's not that I'm a communist, but I'm not particularly into capitalism, shall we say. And I think that art should be made for the love of it, and I think art should be made for expression and not just to make profit. Though I understand where we fit into all of that. Anyway, long story short, I came across, through my working with colleges, I came across a generation of digital-only fashion designers who I thought were fascinating. This was probably about 3 years ago. I wasn't sure at that time what they were going to do with their digital-only fashion. However, about 2 years ago, as we all know, there was a sort of big boom in the whole NFT idea. And so we got caught up in the energy of that and decided to do a collection which shows 30 new digital fashion designers. And we wanted a central figure to hang this on. And I'd worked with a person, a model in New York called Giselle, who goes under the Instagram handle of Ugly Worldwide. And I just thought they were particularly interesting because they're not a conventional model. They have the ability to create their own imagery, which they do very well. And they frequently change identity or frequently change their visual appearance. And they're very masterful at that. I just think they're one of those generation of people who express themselves through Instagram and similar platforms to show their world. They don't need outside help from photographers or advertising agencies or brands or catwalks or anything. I think there's a whole generation of people doing that, creating, if you want, their own image and creating their own world. So I was very interested, so I approached Giselle, who I'd worked with in any case, and said to them, would I want to be the center of this? So Giselle is the center, which means that they're the person that's wearing all the digital fashion. And then I worked with somebody who I've known for a long time, who actually used to be my conventional retoucher. So when I was doing campaigns for Christian Dior and for Lancôme back in the 1990s, they would do the cosmetic retouching and sort of beautify all that sort of stuff. So I asked Tom, so they'd stopped being my conventional retoucher, and they'd gone off to California to learn CGI. So they were very up on avatar creation and making virtual spaces and all that sort of thing. So we worked together and created this collection, which is 8,000 pieces, which is a huge collection. But when you put together the 30 different digital fashion designers, then we got different hair pieces made by a very good, I think one of the best in the world, hairdressers called Eugene Solomon, who works with people like Calvin Klein and Margiela and Dior and all these different well-known brands. And they're somebody who is very tactile, and we were speaking a minute ago about how it's so important to feel some sort of touch by the hand of the artist. And if we can reproach anything to digital art, it can feel a bit remote, and it can feel a little bit soulless. So I very much wanted to show that wasn't always the case. So we got Eugene to come into the studio and create headpieces out of things like eucalyptus bark, or robin feathers, or honey, or melting wax, or all these so physical things, much as you would do kind of, to actually make sculptures. And then we 3D scanned those and put those on the avatar of Giselle. So there's lots of different traits, and we created different body types and different skin textures, some based on old chinoiserie, some based on sort of 17th century porcelain. So they're quite, they have a lot of history to them as well. I think that's also really important, is that we use the past to create the future as well, rather than just sort of ignoring it or wallowing around in it either. I don't want to sort of, spend my whole time looking over my shoulder and looking back to the past. But I think it's important. There's been some incredible things made, and I think we should use that to help us sort of, in some way, deal with the future. We are creating a new civilization or a new a new culture, so we say less pompously. So I think it's important that it has real value to it, real aesthetic value to it, which means it needs to have depth and soul and culture and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I do think with digital fashion or digital creativity, if you're from a place where you've had a lot of materials as part of your process, and it seems that within fashion it is very process driven, which is fun. It's part of the R&D, and fashion is a communication tool ultimately. It's narrative. It creates the culture and bridges many genres and eras, as you mentioned, but sort of propels it forward. I love the fact that the NFT market is being actually disrupted by the fashion crowd at the moment.
Good, I'm glad you see it that way. I hoped you would, but I'm not sure everybody shares that opinion. But
I guess the other thing you were saying about your model, Giselle. This whole it's a real empowerment of. It's not really individuality, but there are no more gatekeepers. There's no one to say Giselle can't do this or do that. She can just create.
No. Well, just to give you a little bit of history on Giselle, I first came across her on Instagram probably about 6 years ago, and they were at a model agency in Chicago doing some modeling part-time, and they shaved off their eyebrows, and the model agency said, as middle America might do, you'll never work again, we can't use you if you've got no eyebrows, get out of here. And so Giselle went to New York, shaved their head, and then I saw them on Instagram with a head freshly shaved. I thought, amazing. And I had a job to do for Comme des Garçons, so I got Giselle over. They modelled Comme des Garçons for me. But it's important, you mentioned that they're a model. One of the things that I think is important in this project is that we've given them authorship of their own image. So we've got them involved, they create the makeup looks, they create how their face is, they've been involved in every part of this, right from the 3D scan onwards. Models traditionally are referred to as a blank canvas, which I think is slightly demeaning to people to refer to them as a blank canvas, but they are traditionally, and without too much implied criticism, they are the recipient of the photographer's fantasies, the designer's fantasies, etc., etc. And I think in this project for Icon One, we've put Giselle right back in the middle of the creation part. So they are responsible with us for how they look and how they want to appear and all those sorts of things. So I did want their input into that, and I did want them to be at the center of this.
No, it's really easy to criticize the fashion industry because it's such an old industry. It's a legacy industry.
And it hasn't changed for years. I mean, that's the sort of strange thing, that an industry which is based on future desires, so it's sort of predictive, it predicts our desires arguably 6 months or a year ahead, but this is actually very hard to make it change. And it is slightly a slow adopter to things like NFTs or to avatars or to virtual reality. It doesn't sort of get there very easily. And it's because it needs to change. And of course, because it is quite a traditional industry, weirdly, it's actually quite established in its sort of way it does things. So it does things with a catwalk show in one of the 3 or 4 major capitals, and then with a sort of, the buyers buying that, and the photographers working with the magazines to promote that, which comes out 3 or 4 months later. That's the model that they work to. However, since, about 10 years ago, things haven't been the same. Once the catwalks are live, and you can see on the moment the model step onto the catwalk, the public can see them, then they want that desire then. That completely disrupts the whole of that industry. But now I'm a very firm believer that is a redundant model. It's not even fashionable anymore.
It's unnecessary.
Unnecessary, not fashionable, not sustainable, and actually not what people want to see.
Complete agreement.
Good.
Thank you,
My
Nick.
pleasure. Nice to speak to you.
Lovely to speak to you too.